Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia. Here on Left Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we want to continue to tell you and emphasize that in 2024, we're still rising out of the ashes together. I want to say Happy New Year to you all. I hope you've had a beautiful start to the year. This year will be what you make it. You have the power to do that. And so I want to emphasize that as well. Our topic on tonight, we are talking about 2024 projects and events with our guest, Shelly Edwards Jorgensen. She is the author of Beautiful Ashes. And so I really wanted to catch up with Shelly to see what she's doing this year. Our co-host is Bob Wood, president of Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for our co-host, or our guest, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. You can also text us at 437-778-3299. If you also have some resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, your community, any faith organizations, or local organizations, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. And with that, Bob, if you would greet our listeners for the first time in 2024.
For the first time in 2024. So happy New Year to everybody around the world, and wherever and community you may be in. As always, I'm very very happy to be here. Very very excited to have Ms. Jorgensen as our guest this evening, and discuss this. Let's see what else is going on. I'm retired from Gwinnett, and I'm loving it. Although I am not retired as a Title IX coordinator, had some folks that I've worked with. Could you come over and talk to us about this and consult, which is fine. So retirement is not fully retired, but that's okay. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are. And again, I'm looking forward to this evening's conversation. So thank you for having me here, as always.
Thank you for being here. So I have to ask you really quick. So how's retirement going for Linda?
Her first comment to me today was, God, it feels good to sleep to 8 o'clock. It's been so long. So she gets to 8. I usually get to about 6 when our crazy adopted dog comes in and lets me know that, all right, I'm up. You need to be up. I need somebody to play with.
Oh my God. They're hungry.
Yeah.
It's crazy when 8 a.m. is late. Shelly, if you would please greet our listeners on tonight.
Well, I was going to say Merry Christmas, but Happy New Year, everyone. I'm still trying to see if I'm going to write 2023 or 2024. If you remember back in school, it's like the first few weeks, you're like, oh no. But I'm so glad to be here again and to chat with you guys and catch up and just touch base about, what's going on and what we're doing.
Yes. Thank you so much. Listeners, as usual, we want to share some resources, and then we're just going to go right back to Shelly and begin our topic for the evening. First, if you would like to donate, we still are seeking donations for Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. The work that we do with emergency funding, immediate and emergency funding. We help individuals with doctor's visits. We help with food, with clothing. We help with transportation, getting from one place to another for safety. If you would like to help us, you can visit GoFundMe and look for our nonprofit, Rise Out of the Ashes, Inc. We need help to do what we do. We want to continue doing it, and we want to be able to do it on a larger level. We also want to share with you Pastor Darius Daniels. He's the pastor of Change Church. He has several locations in the United States. His website is dariusdaniels.com, and his YouTube channel is Darius Daniels TV. We want to share with you in the Virgin Islands, the Women's Coalition of St. Croix, Christianed Virgin Islands. Their website is wcstx.org. In Puerto Rico, we have the Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Their website is PAZPARALAMUJER.org. And in New Mexico, we want to share the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Their website is www.nmcadv.org. And then the New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs, also in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Their website is nmcsap.org. With that, we want to move right into our topic. Before we get into the projects and events of 2024, Shelly, I would ask if you could just talk a bit about your story again and share a bit with our listeners and viewers who may not be familiar with Beautiful Ashes, your story and your book.
Yeah, I wrote my book because I've been through just basically a lifetime of trauma, honestly, and it started with domestic violence. And just so everyone can see, this is my book that it came out in Beautiful Ashes came out in 2022 in April, actually on my birthday. And I wrote it because I'm trying to help others see that there's a path to healing no matter what happens in life. As I mentioned, I grew up in domestic violence, and it escalated to murder. When I was 15 years old, my dad murdered my mother and burned our house down. And then things got worse for my sister and I because we had to live with him, and we were living out our lives in the newspaper. I grew up in an upper middle class suburb of Detroit. And so literally the night of the fire, I was watching my house on fire on the 11 o'clock news, and then reading about it in the newspaper for the next 2.5 years until my dad's trial. But I lived with that threat my entire life. And so it sets you up to be victimized in other ways as well. And so I've also been a victim of rape multiple times, molestation, and then I've had a litany of health issues. And as I've learned now that it's primarily from unresolved trauma over the years. There's a book out there that's called Body Keeps the Score, and I didn't realize it, but it does. And I've learned that over the last probably, I don't know, 10 years really. But so I've had a whole host of things. I mean, the almost 400-page book doesn't cover everything, but it and it's not all just about trauma. I mean, it's my journey through the whole process and where I am today, which is thriving. And despite the things that I've been through, I've been able to have a very happy and successful life. But there was a long period of time where I was praying to die every day. And on paper, and I was in my mid-30s at this point, and on paper you would have thought, oh, well, everything's okay. I put on the face like everything was okay, because even though I was the star witness for the prosecution at my dad's trial. I mean, I talk about that extensively, and then I had to go home with him. I mean, that whole part of my life was a nightmare, but I essentially was an orphan at that time because he went to prison. I was still a senior in high school, but I managed to get my bachelor's degree in engineering, my dream job as an engineer in the auto industry. I just graduated with my master's degree in business, and I have my own home. And like I said, on paper you would think everything was hunky-dory, and outwardly, I put on. I've always been the person to be okay. My friends at the time in high school have told me, "Well, Shelly, you were the one that was helping us be okay," and so, but I was dying inside for 20 years it took me to figure out some of the things that I've learned through the process. I mean, of course I had to do trauma therapy and I had to find the right therapy because it's not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
But then I managed to, process the trauma in the way that worked best for me, and also changed my perspective, and continued. And that was, I'm 53 now, and so, I'm 20 years out from there almost now, where I continue to build on what I've learned, and now my whole goal and mission in life is just to help people learn what it took me 20 years to figure out, and if it's possible for the same methods that I used and the same mindset and the same learning that I did to help somebody else. That's my goal. And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I'm doing podcasts and interviews, and I'm working so hard at this because I love people, I care about people, and I know that lots of people are hurting in lots of different ways, and so that's my intent.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And actually, before we actually move into the topic, just listening to you, just a couple questions came to me. And actually, these are questions that are often asked of me. So I want to ask you, does it get easier for you sharing your story, sharing your experience? I'm asked that a lot. I'm asked if every time I do what I do, does it feel different? Does it feel easier? Is it like telling a story that I've completely removed myself away from mentally and emotionally? So how is that for you?
Well, I guess I would say that it doesn't get easier every single time because I'm no longer charged by what's happened to me. I'm no longer triggered by what's happened to me in on these subjects, because I've been on this journey for a very long time, and I've come to accept, and actually not just accept, I've come to understand and know that all adversity is a gift. I know that sounds ridiculous to even say that, but all adversity that we have in our life is a gift because it's an opportunity for growth. Now, no one goes out looking for pain and suffering. Nobody. Absolutely nobody does. But with that being said, if you have an obstacle in front of you, it gives you an opportunity to learn something. It's my fundamental core belief that we're born to receive a body because we're spiritual beings, but also to learn the attributes of Christ. And how do you learn humility, patience, empathy, compassion, long suffering, endurance, all the way up to charity, which is the pure love of Christ? How do we learn these characteristics? How do we develop these characteristics? You don't develop them by just continued, self-indulgence in all the things that you want, because you have to, how does a loving parent teach a child patience? They have to wait, and they don't just wait begrudgingly. You have to learn how to wait lovingly, patiently.
Yeah.
And so again, I started this trauma therapy in my mid-30s, and I found the right therapy. I had done talk therapy on and off for 15 years. I was still praying to die every day. But I found the therapies that work for me, and there's more than one size fits all, like I said earlier. And so you don't give up on therapy if you haven't found a modality that works for you. And I found that the ones that are beyond talk therapy, like EMDR, NET, cranial sacral work, Reiki, all of these other things were more advantageous for me. NET, which is neuro-emotional technique, was by far the linchpin that changed things for me. But anyway, I had at the same time period in my life, I decided that I always believed in God, but I didn't trust him because I had been betrayed by so many men already in my life. And so I said, okay, well, I I'm either going to trust that his plan is better than my plan and that he's smarter than I am, or I'm not. So I made that commitment. Okay, I'm going to trust him, and then I'm going to believe that the atonement can do that Christ can do exactly what he said he could do, which is heal you. I mean, that's what the atonement is about. It's about being able to be forgiven for sin, but it's also about healing. And so I said to myself, okay, well, I'm going to try to learn how to apply that. And so while I was doing that, I started having all these paradigm shifts. I opened myself up to a greater understanding that adversity is a gift. Now, I'm like I said, I'm almost 20 years into taking these steps to get to this point where I'm this bold in saying something so ridiculous that if somebody would have told me that 25 years ago, I would have been like, you're an idiot. So
Well, then thank you so much for sharing it. And I absolutely know what you mean. I totally understand when you say adversity is a gift. I do believe you need to have your experience and move through your experience, and the decisions that you make moving through your experience, how you handle that, I think that determines whether you take your adversity and it becomes a gift, or whether your adversity just continues to be something that destroys you mentally
yep,
and emotionally.
yep,
And
it's a choice.
usually, yeah, it's a choice. So usually, if we're hurt physically, we understand, I can do A, B, and C, and physically I will recover. But if we don't do the right things, which could be counseling, which could be just being honest about what it was that has happened, not putting your head in the sand and just actually dealing with the situation. If you don't handle it the right way, the adversity can just become a more trauma. But I understand exactly what you mean when you say adversity is a gift. It depends on the individual, and I do believe, as you said, you're 20 years into this. I'm years into my path of healing. You don't just say that overnight, so it does take the time along the path to put into it. I mean, the things that I can say and do today, I couldn't do years ago. Like I said, I wasn't even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I if anyone told me I would be where I am today, doing what I'm doing, and I'm okay, I'm living my life, I'm enjoying myself, I would have said you're off your rocker, because I couldn't
Yep,
see it happening. And when you're in
yep,
it, when you're dealing with it, when you're dealing with the physical and the emotional and the mental part, you can't see in front of you. You can't. You
no,
gotta deal with it and get through. So again, I understand exactly what you mean. And one of the other questions that I wanted to ask you, just in listening to you, you said, and your friends told you that you were always the person to help to make sure that everyone else was okay. I want to ask you, do you still find yourself in that position with the experience that you have, with the healing that you have? Do you still find yourself being the one who's the support and encouragement to everybody else around you? And if you do,
yeah,
is it hard? Okay, so is that hard?
no, because it's who I am. I've been that way. I've been that. I mean, I have friends from elementary school. Like, I have friends from elementary school that the only reason why, um, well, even Sabrina, who's in the book, who's like plays a key role in what happened at that time. The only reason why we became best friends is because I, she was the new girl, and it wasn't like, I mean, I was, I had a lot of friends. So I wasn't looking, I wasn't lonely and lacking in friends. I had a lot of friends. I was an athlete. So I'd been an athlete, but I was the person in school that befriended every new kid. I was the person in school that that had friends in every clique, in every group, because I I guess that's one of the gifts that I was born with. Was I was given the gift of empathy, and it's only increased over time.
Mhm.
And so I and it also gives me purpose in my own pain, because I can use what I've learned through my own experiences to help somebody else, and that gives purpose to that pain that I've had to endure um, as well. And you know, one of the things, another thing that I learned, besides or I should say, in addition to adversity as a gift, is that there's equality in adversity. Now, nobody has it harder than you do or easier than you do. It's relative to you as an individual.
Mhm.
We're all born with our own different strengths and weaknesses. So if the requirement is for all of us to learn um, empathy or compassion or humility, we're all going to be taught in whatever way is best for us to be taught those lessons. And so therefore all of us will be pushed to whatever that limit is that we have. So so you know, it's easy to try to compare and say, oh, well, so and so has it easier. Well, no, they don't have it easier. They have it different. So what's hard for you might be easy for me. What's easy for me might be hard for you. And so it's because we're individuals, which makes the world beautiful, is that we're individuals. And so we have we're all going to be pushed to our limit. That's just, again, God is just. He's just. So it wouldn't make logical sense for that not to be true. And so you one of the things that we tend to do is we think that we have it harder than somebody else, and then we start feeling sorry for ourselves, and we get in this do loop of why me. And you know, so that's another thing that I learned is I stop. It's okay to acknowledge. It's okay to have that thought like, are you kidding me? Why me? Why again?
Yeah.
Why? But, you know, allow yourself the grace to ask that question, but also give yourself the wisdom to take on the answer of, okay, it's because I need to learn something. So I'm going to change my question. What is it I'm supposed to be learning? And how do I use that to help myself and others?
Yes.
And um, and that answer might come quickly, and it might come continuously for the next decade or longer, because I'm still learning that answer of what on lessons that started long ago.
Yeah.
So
What
so
that
that
makes perfect sense. Yeah.
so that's another thing about, you know, helping people is, you know, life's a team sport, and we're here to help each other. We're here to use our combined experience and knowledge, and um, it gives us an opportunity to exercise compassion and service, and those things fill you. And whenever I give, I receive more than I ever give. It's like you can never give more in service than you receive back in return in how you feel about giving service.
Yeah. And I think once you get to a place of healing, then you are able to perform a service and helping someone else. Um, and I agree, and I love the analogy of the team that you used. And Bob, I'll go to you after this for a question or comment before we talk about the Shelly's upcoming projects. But I myself, I'm in the same position. I've been in years being the one who's supportive. But what I've learned in using the the team analogy. There are some players that I'm just there for, and I know I give, and that's just it. They cannot give me what I give to them. So I've learned, I've had to broaden my team. So there are individuals that I know who I can go to for support to give me what I need mentally and emotionally. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that that's something that ever changes whether you have trauma in your life or not. If you're the person that's there and you're supportive and you're encouraging, and everyone is coming to you, it's like you're the counselor in the office. I think that's a beautiful quality to have, and trauma doesn't take that away. But once you get through your place of trauma and what you need, I think it's very important to recognize who you can go to, who your support system needs to be, because you can't always give. Giving
Right.
is beautiful, but at some point you do need to receive just to rest and to recharge. So I agree with that. And I think, again, the team analogy is a beautiful analogy. Um, Bob, you have a question or a comment?
Um, I like. I'm having my own trauma here. For some reason, something has hit me with dust or allergy or something, and my head's like suddenly going crazy.
I'm
Um,
trying not to cough. I'm trying
yeah.
to
So if I
say.
disappear, it's like, okay, Bob's looking for a Kleenex because his head just went crazy. Sorry, I'm sorry about that. Something came out of the sky. Anyway, I as I was listening, I mean, there lots of thoughts went through my head. Number one, I absolutely believe this. If you pray to God to be courageous, God's not going to come down and shove courage into you. You're going to get an opportunity to be courageous. You're going
Yeah.
to get an opportunity to be strong. And strong doesn't necessarily going out and mean, bench pressing 325 pounds.
Hmm.
Strong means strong in here, standing up to
Mhm.
something. Um, and I believe empathy can be learned through these, I guess, trials, lack of a better term, and overcoming those hurdles.
Hmm.
And I also believe there are some people, as you said, it's natural.
Hmm.
It's natural. I mean, I even in the most difficult of scenarios when I was in law enforcement, it never entered my mind not to stop when I needed to stop something. You know what I mean? And I even had empathy for people that were on the other side of the bars. And I heard their story, and I'm like, yeah, I know how you got, because I grew up in that neighborhood where some of those people came from,
Hmm.
and I knew what happened. And very ironically, when you said life is a team sport, um, when I was in high school, bit of an athlete, um, played ball, but there was a certain small group of us that really bonded together. And ironically, we all had the same background. None of us wanted to be in our own home. We wanted to be somewhere else.
Mhm.
When I went to college and continued, um, even my athletic career, and then even when I stepped into the theater, it was there that group. Everybody had that. We came from that. Nope, I wanted to get out of there. So it's fun. Yeah, it is a team sport, and I found that sometimes people who have that similar background tend to become teammates quicker than others because there's an understanding.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've said this a billion times. With somebody who's truly your friend will sit with you when needed, and know sitting is what you need, not necessarily a conversation or advice.
Right.
Sometimes it's just thank, appreciate it. I don't know. This is going to sound really, really silly. One of my favorite movies is um, the trilogy, Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. If you've ever seen it, there's the scene where Gandalf sits next to Bilbo after he's lost his friend, and not a word said, and you can feel that moment. And that's a reality in life. Sometimes that's what we need. Um, and as you say, as you go through, life is a series of averts. There's no getting around it. I mean, it's just, I used to chuckle and say, well, you got a choice. You can laugh or you can cry. What do you want to do?
Yeah, and sometimes you find yourself doing both
At
Right.
the same time. Yeah. Oh, precisely. At the same time. And the other one too, I think, oh, God, we see so many people that just, I think they've lost the ability to laugh at themselves.
Mhm.
Because, when you can laugh at yourself, then you can take that true journey. You can look at yourself and say, ay, ay, ay.
Yeah.
And work from that point forward. So, it's interesting. I've said this before, as Tia, you've heard me. But usually people who come from backgrounds that have had more trauma than most tend to step into this line of work.
Yeah.
Because we sit there and going, I got you. I understand that. And yeah. So
People
there
need to
we
be
go.
understood.
Oh
People
yeah,
need to
no,
be
it's
understood.
Mhm.
my
You know, and you either become what we're doing, or you become a perpetrator if you have our background. I don't,
Yep.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or my background usually. That those are the two paths. I mean, there is some middle ground, and there's some people that are still healing from the effects of severe trauma in childhood, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because the journey is not linear,
Mhm.
and there's no right or wrong way to do it, and there's no time frame in which to do it. And so fortunately for me, I am where I am, but my sister's not where I'm at, and she's 2 years older than me. So that's her journey, and I don't really talk about her journey, but she's not where I am, and that's okay. And it's not that she hasn't seen my journey or been that I haven't she's just not ready. It's not where she's at. And so I just support her, and you have to support people where they are.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, people need to be understood. And that's that sitting thing.
What you said is exactly true, and again, I know Tia knows this. She's heard me say it before. When I was training Title IX coordinators to be investigators, etc., my stock beginning statement every time was, "If you want to be a good investigator, close this, open these. Let the person talk. Let them, because they need to be heard, which is why they came to you to begin with. They want to, and they need to be heard." And that, from my RAs to even when I was a police officer, I mean, I figured that out very, very quickly in law enforcement. I used to watch the old tick in the box, interview method. And I'm sitting there going, most people I know do not take a notebook to their assault or their robbery or whatever. Oh, wait a minute, you're going to rob me? Let me pull out my notebook. You're wearing a plaid shirt. You're 6 foot. You're 6'2". You're no. And I got in the habit quickly of just asking, best you can, tell me what happened. And I'd step back and listen. And I had other officers like, how did you get that story? I said, because I shut my mouth. I did what I'm not doing now. I shut my mouth and I opened my ears. And it just, there's that. That is the very first step in anybody's journey to healing.
Yeah.
Is to be heard. So.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for what you shared, and I don't think anything is silly at all about. I think that's absolutely beautiful. I mean, and just like Shelly said, we want to be understood. We want our pain to be understood. We want to be heard. We want to be just appreciated as a person, and sometimes that means I just need you to sit here and say nothing. Don't give me advice. Don't give me directions. Don't ask me questions. Just sit here. So I think that's an absolutely beautiful thing. And Bob, you were talking about opportunities to be courageous, and I just want to take that point to lead us into Shelly, your year 2024, to talk about that, because I think that was a beautiful description as well. Opportunity to be courageous. Everything that you do, that is courageous to continue to share your story, to continue to be there. Again, especially for the young people, I always reference young people when I'm speaking to you or speaking about you, because you are one of the people who have young people in the forefront of your mind, because you know what it's like. You've been there and you haven't forgotten about them, even though you've come to this great place in your healing journey. You haven't forgotten about them. And so I want to ask you, what new or continued projects do you have coming up for 2024?
Yeah, I'm basically just going to continue to line up podcasts because again, my primary thing is to share my story so I can help others and connect with people through all the social media accounts that I'm on, and I haven't lined up yet my book events for this year. But I'm going to be starting to do that in within the next week to start. And last year I did a ton of book signing events. I was a finalist for a major writing award out in Utah, and so because I live in Michigan, I was flying out there. I'm like, well, I might as well make the most of it. So I did like 10 signing events in 8 days. It was kind of crazy. So my fall was full of just book signing events every weekend, and I did that basically 10-day gauntlet, and so I'm gonna do some more book events. And we talked briefly about how I'm a woodworker, and that's another thing is it is important to find the things that give you joy, even if you're still in the depths of despair. Finding the little things that give you joy will at least shine a little bit of light on you in that moment, and just it does help to get out of your head. And so I'm in the process of constructing my workshop of my dreams, and so I'm like, how am I going to combine my book stuff with my woodworking stuff? And so I'm going to do some craft fairs for book signing events this year, which most of the book signing events I did last year were really focused on like major author events at bookstores and like some expos and that sort of thing, and a couple other fairs. But I have friends that have done them at just craft fairs, and so I'm like, I will set up my my pens and my woodworking and whatever I decide to do, and I'll put it on one table and I'll have my book stuff on another. So that's a goal for me, to combine both things that are near and dear to my heart. And but then the other thing is I need to look, and you mentioned youth, and Jennifer also talked to me about this, and I need to figure out how I can connect with people that are working with youth in this realm. And last year was just a kind of craziness for me. I had two new grandchildren, and I had all these book events and all this stuff, so I didn't have the time to really investigate. And so that's a goal for me this year too, is to try to get more involved in community stuff that specifically deals with kids that were like me. Because I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this in any of our other discussions, but I was 15 when all this went down, and CPS never even talked to me, not once. I was literally an orphan, technically, because I was still a minor when my dad went to prison, and they still never talked to me. So I in the course of doing the book events, I've met up with other authors, who writing is their side job, and one of them that I met this fall is a social worker, and she basically said that, and I've had two people that have been social workers in working in the system that that told me that because I wasn't lower income, that that group of kids falls through the cracks, and how the system is broken on both ends is the lower income kids get too much intervention and too much messing with,
Yeah.
and the other kids don't get enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And assumptions that they're going to be taken care of, and that they're not going to fall through the cracks. And then I also had a prosecutor. This was the summer that the book came out in 2022. She reached out to me. She happened to be in Michigan too, but not Metro Detroit where I am. She's in Upper Michigan, and she messaged me. She's like, "Geez, she 5 years earlier she had retired from being a prosecutor, and she says, Shelly, I hope I never did that to a child, but I can't be sure that I did or didn't." Which is, I mean, Robert, they called me as a witness. I did not know for 2.5 years that I was going to be the star witness for the prosecution to prove first-degree premeditated murder. They put me on the stand for an entire day, and I'm recanting now things that I never even talked about. I didn't even learn until 2 days before I got on the stand that I was going to be testifying for the prosecution. My dad gave me an address, said, "You need to go meet with this lawyer to get prepped for trial on Monday." And as she's showing me evidence where I had lived in denial for 2.5 years, trying to believe my dad's lie, which I knew wasn't true the moment I knew my mother was missing. And she's showing me all this evidence, and then she starts telling me these stories about my dad threatening to kill us all and burn the house down. Well, that was said my whole life. I was 6 years old the first time I heard that, and several other stories, but I never told a soul. Never even, and I didn't even know how this woman knew these stories. And she's asking me if they're accurate, and then she puts me on the stand for me to the first person time that I ever recalled these stories was in court, in front of my father, being used as a witness to send him to prison for life. And I only had 2 days to grapple with the fact that I wasn't going to believe his story that I was trying to force myself to believe. So, I mean, the whole thing was a nightmare. And I know that the system is not much better than that.
I'm going to comment on that from both my backgrounds: police officer, Title IX coordinator. No, the system. I mean, there have been improvements made since when I was in law enforcement, but there's still a long mile to go to make things better. I mean, I can remember a court commissioner when I was handling a case of a woman was shot at 5 times. Thank God the guy didn't shoot. I had witnesses that had seen him leave the building, tag number of the car, tracked him down, got her to safety, wrote everything down that I just told you. More than enough probable cause to go make an arrest. I mean, there's a prima facie case there. It's right there. Can't miss it. Court commissioner looked at me, and my hand to God on this looked at me and said, "Well, where's the victim?" And I said, "The victim's in a safe spot with, she's already been victimized enough. She doesn't have to sit here 2 hours waiting for me. I'm not signing this. They'll be in love tomorrow." I almost went to the roof. I mean, I got called in my lieutenant's office for my reaction to that statement, and the fact that I said, "Good, okay, don't sign it. Just give me your boss's name because I'm calling him." What? I said, "If she gets hurt, it's not my name that's going to go in the paper. It'll be yours for not doing your job." You can see it still makes me angry.
Yes.
I got called into my lieutenant's office, and I got to calm down. And just recently, as a Title IX coordinator, I know Tia knows this. I won't mention the state. I won't mention the state's attorney, but I had a student, young lady. There was a PFA which had been violated over 10 times and documented in the court system. And the person came back and continued, and there were very similar threats. I'm going to burn your house down. What got the children on the phone? I'm going to kill you. Finally got the effect of the arrest. DA's office didn't contact her till 2 or 3 days before the hearing. Meanwhile, I'm trying to guide her through this, telling her all the right things. The only thing I will say is the people who are in that state know me because I wrote from the mayor all the way down, the governor all the way down to the local district attorney and said, hey, you have a victim's rights bill. It's your law and you're not following it. When are you going to follow it? And that, I hate to say it, happens more often than not.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, people sometimes wonder why law enforcement officers become callous, and because what they see is that end of it doesn't do its job.
Right.
But and I used to always kind of remind people, I can't do anything about what they do, but I can make somebody safe right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And you got to hang on to that. You got to hang on to that moment. So.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry.
what's the and he's and that could have been true. They could have been in love tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that you don't take action today.
No, exactly.
I mean, let's err on the side of caution here, and make it. I mean, that becomes her choice.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes.
But like, for example, literally, I told you I watched on ABC, NBC, and CBS. I watched my house on fire.
Wow.
Because there was a freelance photographer that got there before the fire trucks got there. And so there was video of my house on fire. They're announcing on the 11 o'clock news that it's basically a suspicious fire. They already knew it was arson. They already knew. You have a dead 50-year-old woman. You know that it's arson. And the next, less than 12 hours later, we're at the police station. My dad shows up with a criminal defense attorney. Okay, red flag number one. Mm-hmm. Why, if this is an accidental fire, that, she had a heart attack and dropped a cigarette while smoking, that's a different part of the story. But, so number one, if you're a police officer, if I was a police officer, that would be suspicious. Number one, he's got a criminal defense attorney. 12 hours later, you have a dead 50-year-old woman. And now that I'm 53, I know that 50 is not old. So
I'm 70. It's not. Trust me, really, it's not.
and so I was the last person home before, because my sister and I were at basketball practice, but I was the last one home. My dad sends his attorney in the room with me to be questioned. Now, I'm a child that has grown up in domestic violence. We are trained to be silent.
Oh, yeah.
We are trained to hide abuse. So the police, they already know it's arson, and you already know you have a dead 50-year-old woman that is burned beyond recognition. Okay, like severe. I won't get graphic, but It was severe. I mean, they know that she was doused with a flammable substance. So they already know all of this. And they do not ask me one question about domestic violence. Mm-hmm. They ask me what my dad was doing when I got home off the bus. They asked me, all these questions. Not one time did they ask me about domestic violence. And then number two, so that the fire happened in October. My dad was not arrested until February. In that time period, my grandmother and my aunt and some of my mother's friends wrote letters to talk about the history of domestic violence. And do you know how many times they came back and talked to my sister or I again about it? Zero.
I was going to say zero. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Zero. Yeah. And we're living with him. Mm-hmm. And my sister and I had to post his bond when he got arrested.
I can tell you
So I mean, the
precisely.
whole system is a disaster.
I
Mhm.
can tell you precisely why that happens, because the homicide aspect of it all of a sudden takes center stage precedent. And I'm sitting there going, but there's a reason it happened.
Mhm.
There's a background. I mean, again, I won't go in the backgrounds, but I can remember. I was in special ops. We responded first to somebody who was in distress, and it was a pregnant lady who literally had fallen, and she had fresh needle marks all the way down her arm. I mean, I know fresh, when I saw them, and I'm going, that's not right. I got a rear bedroom door that had a lock on it kicked in. I got drawers rifled through, and I have a homicide detective that shows up. First words out of his mouth: "It's an overdose.
Oh,
She
it's an
was drunk.
overdose.
It's an overdose. She was."
Hmm.
And I said, "Can I just point out one thing?" And ladies, I know you will appreciate this much more than men. The little like slip-on slipper socks that women like to wear to keep their feet warm. She's laying in the chair, and they're rolled up under the front of her feet. Somebody dragged her to that chair. Nobody walks around with their socks balled up under their feet like it's uncomfortable. Um, Meanwhile, and I stepped out in the hallway for 2 seconds, and I had two people in the hallway that told me that X, Y, and Z ran out of the apartment. Da 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 da. And I said, "Excuse me." You're going to laugh at me because I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Defective, could you come out here for a minute, please?" And my partner was like, "Why do you do those things?" And I'm like, "Cause he couldn't find an olive in a martini glass." Um,
Yeah.
I mean, but again, that was another discussion with my lieutenant, but that's okay. But yeah,
Yeah.
they compartmentalize the one issue
Mhm.
as opposed to looking
Hmm.
at the bigger picture. And I got it. I mean, I've been there. I know how strained law enforcement agencies can be. But on the other hand, you, we all took an oath.
Right.
An
To
oath
figure it out.
to
To
do
do
certain things. So
it.
you got to get take your best swing at doing your best job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll climb
Well,
up.
and every situation is so dynamic and different too,
Oh
and
yeah.
and I get it. I mean, yeah, being a police officer is a brutal, hard, thankless job most of the time, and it would be frustrating to continue to be called because domestic violence is a pattern that
Oh
keeps
yeah.
repeating itself as it escalates, and but there's so much that happens to you when you're in that situation. I gave the analogy before, not with our discussions, Tia, but someone asks, everyone always says, well, if this happened or this happened, I'd be out. Oh, would you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
well, no, this is domestic violence is like the frog in the boiling water. When you first start that relationship, everything is great. As a matter of fact, it might even be too good in a lot of ways. And so then it's like one thing happens, and then there's forgiveness, and then it gets, it constantly builds until you lose yourself a little at a time, and you lose your confidence because it's by the time it's physical, there's a whole host of emotional and mental abuse and every other kind of abuse in control that's happened. So by the time it's escalating to physical, the water is already boiling, and the frog is beat up and weak. So and you want to believe the lie because you were in love with this person at the beginning, and you probably still love them then.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. It's very easy to be an armchair quarterback on domestic violence.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity to speak to police officers and the Upper Darby Police Station. The superintendent is Tim Bernhardt, and he asked me to come in and speak to some of his officers, which I did, and they were appreciative of my story. And I was able to say to them, first of all, I was able to say thank you because it's like doctors and nurses. You see someone, they come in, you treat them, they go home. You don't know what happens in the end. So a lot of police officers, they go out to a home, it's domestic violence. They don't know what happens after that call. And so I had the opportunity to say to them, you may not ever know how stories end up, but I'm telling you, thank you, because I'm one of those stories. Because there was a time I had to call the police and the officers that came to me. I never saw them again. I wish I knew who they were. I wish I could remember them so I could go back to them personally. But, I wanted to let them know. Uh, the night that the officers came to my house, they wanted me to leave, and I wouldn't go. It wasn't because I didn't want to be safe. It wasn't because, I enjoyed what was happening around me, but I couldn't leave my house with my children. And so there are a lot of issues that people don't know and they don't understand. I could have very well have walked out of my home with the protection of those three officers. They would have taken me anywhere I wanted to go, but I could not have taken my minor children with me. I couldn't leave them, and I wasn't going to go. And I said to these officers, I need you to just stop this situation right now. What's happening? So I can have some peace and quiet, and so I can think and decide what it is that I'm going to do. But I'm not leaving. I can't leave. I'm not leaving my children. And so just to be able to talk to them and to explain some things like that, because they wanted me to go, but they had to understand. And those officers did. They understood the situation, they talked to him, and they stopped everything as is that was happening. But they understood me. And so the officers that I talked to on that day, they were very attentive. They paid attention. I really wanted to get across that, you can go to a call, and the person who has been victimized, they may be frantic. They may be out of it. They may be yelling. They may be screaming, or they may be absolutely quiet, saying nothing. So you can't, I said to them, you can't go into it thinking you already know how this person should act and what they're going to do, because it's just not going to, it's not going to come out that way. I'm not the textbook case of what a victim of domestic violence looks like. I'm not. I don't cry when people think I should cry. I can tell my story, and okay, like I don't break down and fall apart. I mean, and I've said before, I have my moments. Sometimes it's overwhelming and it gets to me, but I can stand in front of a crowd of people and tell my story and be okay, and not be believed because I have been told you look too good to be a victim of domestic violence. And I try to emphasize that to those officers, and I believe they got that, and they understood it, which is just, it's really important. Um, but yeah, I think everything that you said, it's just, there's so much importance to it, and especially when we come to young people, because they don't have a voice. And as you were talking, I thought about this, and we can think it through later. I would love for you to come back to the program. I One of the counselors that I know does work with young people. I don't want to bring a young person on a program, for the fact of them being a minor, but I would love if we
Right.
could come together and speak to young people as if they were right in front of us, to talk them through, to give them specific advice. So if we could dedicate a program that is just for young people, I would love to work that out with you in some kind of way, and we can even just keep the recording and show the recording in other places where young people will be present. They will have access to it. But really, something needs to be done. But I know, in good conscience, I wouldn't bring a teenager onto the program, because you know what it's like for a teenager to be used, to be taken advantage of, or to be further victimized. I don't want to do that. But
Right.
if we could think through that, I think that would be another tool we could use to dedicate something specifically for young people to help them and encourage them. Bob.
Yeah, I got to throw this into you. My mother, God love her, and I lost her when I was 25. But from the time that it started with me, because I did not know my father, my McComas Wood, I did not know McComas. I remember her talking that much, and I didn't find out anything until I was an officer and I was capable of accessing records for certain things. And the point I'm making is what you said before. Not everybody is the typical victim. My
Hmm.
mom never talked. The most I got out of her was her adamant of me never connecting with Glenn. And yeah, unfortunately, my mother just had bad luck with men and booze. It's that simple. It's a very simple game there. But she would not. In fact, I don't even know if she spoke to my grandparents about it. But as I got older, and of course I had more understanding, I knew something. There was something more than he was just hard to get along with. Um, and it wasn't until I got much older that I looked at Lynn and said, I know she was definitely psychologically abused. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Hmm.
And in the back of my head, just looking at things and pulling what I did and what I could, there's no doubt. I'm pretty sure she was also physically abused. But again, she would never open up about it. Never.
Hmm.
Just couldn't
Yeah,
do it.
the police were never called.
Yeah.
They're, the police were never called. My sister and I were the ones that would physically break up fights. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we're
Yeah.
talking scratches on the neck, trying to pull the tongue out. I mean, choking was my dad's go-to. And if you're being choked, please immediately leave.
Hmm.
That is death is the next step.
Hmm.
If you're being choked or strangled in any way, that is very, 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 very dangerous. And I know that leaving and saying please leave is not something you just pick up and do, and it's not that easy and cut and dry, but I'm telling you right now, that is danger zone.
Hmm.
Yes. I do know that that is something that officers are trained to look for,
Yes.
signs of strangulation, because any signs of strangulation or choking, as you said, the next step is death. It's only going to escalate. Any form of domestic violence, and I say this to individuals, there are different types of domestic violence: financial, spiritual, emotional. There's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, and there's physical abuse. All abuse does not start off with the physical portion. But no matter where it starts, if it's verbal abuse, if it's emotional abuse, if it is not checked, if it is not stopped, all abuse moves into the portion of being physical. And once you get into physical abuse, um, as you said, the step below death usually is strangulation. And so if you are at that point, I mean, any type of abuse is bad, and we want you to do what you need to do for yourself in any situation. But if it's a point of dealing with strangulation, then that is absolutely serious. That can't be emphasized enough. And again, the next step after strangulation is death, and there are statistics to prove that,
Right. Yeah.
to show that.
And
Um,
it might not be step number one. It might not be one, two, three, four, or even 10
yeah.
strangulations. Because my parents were 1 month shy of their 25th wedding anniversary. The abuse started uh, year one,
Mm.
and I was 15. So they were married for 10 years before I was born when my mom died. And I can't remember a time where my dad wasn't choking my mother.
Hmm.
I mean, there was instances where he didn't, but there wasn't like, it didn't start happening when I was 10 or 12 or 13.
Mhm.
I remember it very young. So, as a matter of fact, I remember it being 6 and him threatening to kill her and burn the house down and kill us all, actually, and burn the house down. We fled the house that day, but the police were never called. So, so, there's lots of dynamics. My mother was not the typical victim either.
Hmm.
So, and there is no typical victim. It happens everywhere. I've had so many people that have read my book that I grew up with, that were like, that I went to school with, that, well, even my closest friends didn't know this was happening. But I had so many people that said, Shelly, I wanted to be you. I had no idea this is what was happening. I envied you because of X, Y, and Z. So you don't know what's happening. I mean, I live behind the white picket fence. Our last vacation was a month to Europe. So uh, you don't know. You cannot assume. Domestic violence happens at every socioeconomic level, every
Yes.
culture, everywhere. It's everywhere. Unfortunately, it's the cancer. It's a cancer that is affecting everybody.
Yes.
Again, this is just me, and it's just purely conjecture on my part, and just coming because, again, like I said, it was me and my mom for the longest time, and she was in several marriage relationships, all of which I intervened in certain areas. Um, when things started flying around the house, I'm like, stop. Um, but I think in many instances, the higher the socioeconomic, the easier or the more it's hidden because they have the ability to
Hmm.
pay
Mm-hmm.
to clean up the mess.
Hmm.
Whereas, when I was living on the second floor apartment in Northeast Baltimore in a row house, everybody knew everybody and heard everything. I mean, if you sneezed, the guy next door said, "God bless you."
Right.
So it was much harder, for people not to know. Now they may have turned their heads, but there you got that sideways glance coming at your front door.
Yeah.
You
Right. I
don't.
mean, we had an
You,
acre property, so
yeah,
there's no neighbors hearing that.
right. You don't get that out on Long Island Sound where you got
Mm-hmm.
the fenced off home. It doesn't happen. So
Mhm.
just statement.
Well, we are a few minutes over the hour, but Shelly, I want to ask you to share your website, and then I want to ask you one more question. But and on your website, will your events be listed and posted? So can people find information about your book and your events to support on your website?
Yeah, so my website is www.beautifulashesmemoir.com. And what I tend to do, if you follow me on social media, if I have an event coming up, I post about it. I really do need to put a tab on my website that lists the upcoming events. And then every podcast or interview that I'm on, I try to upload to my website. I'm a little behind on some. I've had some technical difficulties on others, but there's over 20 that are up there now, and but it really on my social media I will list, okay, I'm going to be at this book signing event here, or and I just got asked to come out for a speaking event out in Utah in April. Not sure. It's kind of like the planning stages. Not
Hmm.
sure if it's going to really come to fruition or not. So there will be events. I probably will put something up on my website. That's a really good idea to put upcoming events. And the other thing that I do is I do book clubs. Tia, you were part of the first book club that I did, and I really enjoy doing the book clubs because what happens is when people read my story, they have lots of questions.
Yeah.
And then and I don't really go into a lot of the things that I've learned through it all. It's more like what my journey has been. And so it gives me an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with a group of people that, and they get to have a guest author at their book club.
Yeah.
So if you want to do a book club, just email me through my website, and which my email is beautifulashesmemoir@gmail.com, and I'll set up a book club. We do Zoom meetings and stuff.
Awesome. So, my last question for you for this evening, and then after your answer, I'll ask you and Bob just to give our listeners and viewers your final words for tonight. But I want to ask you, what do you need to be successful in what you do, to continue to do what you do? Is there any help that our listeners and viewers can give to you, can support you in? Like, what do you need to keep doing what you do, and to reach young people?
Spread the word. It's really spread the word. My goal is to connect with as many people as I possibly can to help. And so I need people to tell people about my book, or tell people to go to my website and check out my podcasts. Reach out to me. I try to post inspirational quotes and life lessons on social media. Last year I was really bad at it. My goal is to get back into doing that 3 times a week, and I try to respond to every single person that responds to me, because for me it's about every individual. I If I have the bandwidth to help in any way, that's what I'm going to do. I mean, obviously I have to have some boundaries for myself, but but my goal is just to help people, and I'm genuine when I say that. So I just need the word to get out so that I have the opportunity to help people. And so that's the help that you guys can give to me, is spread the word about my book, doing book clubs, podcasts, all of that, book signings. But book signings are mostly local and local Detroit. So
Awesome. So, Bob, if you would leave us with your final words for the evening, and then Shelly, just your last words for Left Bay on tonight.
Pardon me. I'm going to echo what Shelly and you have said. Um, every situation's different. Every person's different. And I'm the guy that's always screaming, whatever your heart tells you, follow it, because your heart's not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say to the people that, again, I know, I understand and know the feeling of feeling like you're stuck. You're the one in the tunnel. There's no light. But you know what? I'll say this to everyone that's out: trust yourself. Trust yourself. You're infinitely stronger than you think, and just keep. If it's a half an inch step at a time, half an inch step at a time. Keep moving. Keep sort of follow your heart, because it's not going to lie to you.
Awesome. Shelly?
yeah, and my thing would be, there's nothing that's insurmountable.
Hmm.
Absolutely nothing that is insurmountable. It's about mindset, and it's about choices. And you have the power. I am no different than anybody else. You have the power within yourself. Do not believe the lies that have been told to you that you're not good enough. That is a lie. And and take action for yourself, because at the end of the day, the only thing in life that you can control is your response.
Right.
And how you respond defines your ability to find joy, peace, and happiness no matter what happens. And that doesn't come at the bottom of a bottle. It doesn't come at the end of a needle or with a pill. It comes with not numbing. It comes with facing facing the pain, and allowing it to strengthen you, and learn from it, and heal from it. You can heal from it. There's lots of people out here. I mean, the internet didn't exist when I was going through all of this, and so I didn't have my team that I needed. And there's people out here like Tia and Bob and myself that are here to listen, and that are here to support you in your journey. But you have to do the work, and it is work. It's not a light switch. It's a journey. It will be up and down, and you'll be discouraged sometimes, and then you'll feel like you're going forward, then you'll feel like you're going backwards. But don't give up, and you can do it.
Thank you so much. So, Left Bay, we want to say Happy New Year to you again. Shelly, thank you so much for being here. Bob, thank you so much. And absolutely, I really want to touch base with you, and so we can work out the next your next interview. I really want to do something aimed at the young people. So I look forward to that, and thank you in advance. Thank you in advance for that. Love Bay, if you want to catch up on previous episodes from our program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you so much for joining Suffering in Silence with Evangelist Tia here on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Love Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. And we really, really want you to have a happy new year. Make 2024 what you want it to be. Good evening.